She thought she was untouchable. She thought she could humiliate me. One moment, she was smiling with power, and the next, she was begging for help as flames rose behind her perfect walls. I watched it all unfold. The irony, the karma, the fire that no rule book could stop. And the secret that I'm about to tell you will make you never look at your HOA the same way again. Welcome to HOA Secrets. I'm Daniel, a regular guy living in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Texas. I work in IT during the day and mow my lawn on weekends just like everyone else. But in my community, it's not the grass or the fences that keep people awake at night. It's the HOA. And the story I'm about to share is the one that changed everything for me. I thought my neighborhood was safe, peaceful, normal. Rows of houses painted in soft beige and pale gray, green lawns that looked the same, trimmed to the same height, neighbors waving, kids riding bikes, barbecues on summer nights. But behind that perfect picture was something darker, an HOA that controlled everything, an HOA president who loved her little kingdom. Her name was Linda, and she believed she was above us all. She never smiled with warmth. Her lips curled, but her eyes stayed cold, like she was always hunting for her next victim. Every week she walked the street with her clipboard, writing notes, whispering to herself, waiting for the chance to strike. At first it was funny, almost silly. One neighbor got fined for leaving a garden hose on the side of his house, another for planting flowers that didn't match the approved color palette. We laughed about it at block parties. But Linda wasn't joking. She was serious, deadly serious about her rules. And soon, she turned her eyes on me. It started with a letter in my mailbox, the words typed in bold. Violation notice. It said my trash can was visible from the street, $50 fine, payable in 10 days. I shook my head, dragged the bin behind the fence, and thought it was over. But Linda came back. Another letter, this time for my holiday lights. Too bright, too disruptive to neighborhood peace. $100 fine. I pulled them down, even though my kids cried, because they loved those lights. But Linda didn't care. Linda wanted control. She wanted to break me. One hot afternoon, I came home from work and saw a strange man by my side wall. He wore a vest and gloves, and he was pulling at my breaker box. I rushed up to him. "Hey, what are you doing?" Before he could answer, I heard the sound of heels clicking on the pavement, and there she was, Linda, standing with her clipboard, that same cold smile on her face. "Shit, I said it so casually. As HOA president, I have ordered your power shut off. Your energy setup does not match community code." I froze. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My kids are inside. The AC is running. Food in the fridge. She didn't care. She waved her hand like I was nothing, and with one final click, the power went out. The house fell silent. The hum of the fridge stopped. The cool air turned into suffocating heat, and my kids cried in the dark. That night was one of the longest of my life. Candles flickering in the kitchen, sweat dripping down my face as I tried to calm my family, my phone battery dying, and outside, I could see Linda walking past my house, wine glass in her hand. She waved at me through the window, smiling her dead smile. She had won, at least. That's what she thought. I tried calling the utility company. They told me it was private property rules. They said the HOA had authority. In my own home, I wanted to scream, but I stayed quiet. Because deep down, I knew something Linda didn't, something no HOA president can control forever. Karma was already on its way. 2 nights later, I woke to a sound that shook me. Sirens in the street, red and blue lights flashing across my walls. I ran to the window, and my heart stopped. It was Linda's house. Smoke poured from the roof. Neighbors were gathering, gasping, covering their mouths, and the fire truck screeched to a halt in front of her perfect lawn. Firefighters jumped out, dragging hoses, stepping right over her flawless hedges, the same hedges she fined a man for trimming too short. And there she was, Linda herself, on the porch, screaming, her face pale and twisted, begging for help, because without power, without alarms, she had nothing. Her perfect kingdom was crumbling. Her power meant nothing, and I stood in the shadows, watching, the irony burning brighter than the flames. The smoke was thick in the night air. Neighbors whispered in the shadows, their faces glowing red from the fire truck lights. The quiet suburb that always looked so perfect now looked like a scene from a nightmare. And the queen of our HOA, Linda, was no longer in charge. She was begging, screaming, her hands shaking as firefighters rushed past her. She used to fine people for leaving garden tools outside. Now her own porch was covered with black ash and broken glass. I stood still, almost frozen, but inside, I felt something strange. It wasn't joy. It wasn't pity. It was something heavier, the kind of feeling you get when the world finally shows you its irony. I watched the firefighters stomp across her prized roses, the ones she once bragged about at every HOA meeting. Their boots crushed petals into mud as they dragged hoses toward the flames. She yelled for them to be careful, and they didn't even look at her. That moment, I realized how powerless she was. Her clipboard, her rules, her endless letters, none of it mattered now. The fire didn't care about bylaws. The neighbors gathered closer. Some gasped, some covered their mouths, but a few, I swear, had the faintest smiles. Because Linda had made enemies out of everyone on this street. She fined one man for painting his fence the wrong shade of white. She made an old widow pay for having wind chimes on her porch. She bullied a young couple into removing a swing set their kids loved. And now, everyone was watching karma do what they couldn't. The flames climbed higher, and the night filled with the hiss of water. Sirens wailed, neighbors whispered, and Linda stood helpless in the glow of her burning pride. I remembered the night she cut my power. The way she smiled as my house went dark, the way she sipped her wine while my kids cried inside. Now she stood in darkness too, her lights gone, her alarms dead, her comfort destroyed, and we wandered. Did she finally understand what she had done to us? Or would she still find a way to blame someone else? Because that's who Linda was. A woman who never admitted fault, a woman who lived on control. But here, in front of all of us, she was broken, and the sound of her voice, begging for help, was the sweetest silence I had ever heard. I didn't cheer. I didn't clap. I just stood there, arms crossed, watching the fire eat away at her perfection, and for the first time in months, I felt free. The night after the fire felt strange. The street was quiet, but it wasn't the usual quiet. It was the silence that comes after chaos. Ash still floated in the air, and the smell of smoke clung to every porch. Linda's house stood dark, burned on one side, black marks climbing up the siding. The once perfect lawn was torn apart by heavy boots and hoses. Her roses, her pride, lay crushed under puddles of muddy water. Neighbors walked past in small groups, whispering. Some looked worried, but most looked relieved. And me, I sat on my porch in the dark, watching the ruins of her power. For the first time, the queen of our neighborhood had no control. No rules could protect her now. No fines could erase the smell of smoke that wrapped around her house. The next morning, I saw her. She stepped out in the same neat clothes, hair tied back, clipboard in her hand, as if nothing had happened. Her face was pale, tired, but her eyes still held that sharp glint of pride. She tried to wave at people passing by, but no one waved back. It was like the fire had burned away not only her home, but her crown, and everyone could see she wasn't invincible anymore. But Linda, she wasn't going to surrender easily. She held an emergency HOA meeting that very week. She sent letters to every house, attendance required, community safety issues to discuss. I almost laughed when I opened mine. Community safety, the same woman. And who cut my power? The same woman whose own house burned down. And now she wanted to talk about safety. Still, I went. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to see what she would say. I had to see how she would try to spin it. The community hall was packed. Neighbors filled the chairs, some standing in the back. You could feel the tension in the air, like everyone was waiting for a fight. Linda walked up to the front, clipboard in hand, papers stacked neatly. Her voice cracked at first, but then she found her rhythm. She blamed faulty wiring. She blamed the fire department for being slow. She blamed the weather, the heat, the way the wind carried sparks. She blamed everything, except herself. And then she said it. We must enforce stricter energy rules. stricter lawn codes, stricter appearances. She wanted more power, even after losing everything. She still wanted control. The room buzzed with whispers. People rolled their eyes. Some shook their heads. And then, something happened that I never expected. A man stood up in the back row. It was Mr. Jacobs, an old veteran who had lived here for decades. He never spoke in meetings, never argued, never made a fuss. But that night, his voice cut through the room like a knife. "You cut that man's power," he said, pointing at me. "You left his children sweating in the dark. And then, when karma came for you, you still learned nothing." The room went silent. Every eye turned to me. My heart pounded. I wasn't ready for the spotlight, but then, I realized this was my moment. I stood slowly, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes, and I spoke, my voice steady but low. "She thinks rules make her powerful," I said. "But the truth is, the rules are only as strong as the people who follow them. And I think we're all done following rules that destroy families, rules that destroy trust, rules that make us fear our own homes." A murmur spread across the room. People nodded. Some even clapped softly, and for the first time, I saw fear in Linda's eyes. She slammed her clipboard on the table. She tried to shout, tried to remind us of bylaws and legal codes, but her voice shook, and the crowd was no longer listening. The fire had burned more than her house. It had burned her power that night. The meeting ended in chaos. Neighbors walked out, refusing to listen. Some stayed behind, whispering about replacing the board. And Linda, she sat alone at the front table, her hands trembling on her clipboard. The queen with no kingdom. Days turned into weeks. Her letters kept coming. But fewer people cared. Some tore them up. Some laughed and pinned them to their fridges like jokes. The fear was gone, and without fear, Linda was nothing. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. She doubled down, sending out threats of lawsuits, warnings of liens on property. She thought if she screamed louder, maybe people would obey. But the more she pushed, the more people resisted. One night, I saw her walking the street again. But this time, she wasn't writing notes on her clipboard. She was just looking at the houses, her face pale, her eyes sunken, like she was searching for the control she lost, searching for respect that was never coming back. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered my children crying in the dark. I remembered her waving at me while sipping wine, laughing as my power died, and the pity vanished because Linda had chosen this path. She built her throne out of fear, and now it was crumbling into ash. The weeks after that meeting felt like living in a different neighborhood. The fear that once ruled our street was fading. The clipboards, the letters, the constant threats. They were no longer sharp weapons. They were just paper. Neighbors started talking again, freely. I saw kids leave their bikes on sidewalks without parents rushing to hide them. Someone even painted their front door a bright red. Not the HOA-approved beige, and nobody I'd a word. It was like the fire had burned away more than Linda's roses. It had burned her grip on us, but Linda didn't stop trying. Every morning, I found another letter on my porch, the words bold, the threats bigger. Immediate action required. Failure to comply will result in legal action. I didn't even bother opening them anymore. I stacked them in a pile on my kitchen counter. A mountain of empty threats. But still, part of me wondered, what would she do next? How far would she go to take back control? One evening, just as the sun was setting and the air smelled of cut grass, I saw something unusual. Linda's car, slowly rolling down the street. She wasn't driving fast like she usually did when patrolling for rule breakers. She was moving slow, almost crawling. Her window rolled down, her face hidden in the shadows. I watched her from my porch. Her eyes weren't scanning lawns this time. They were scanning people. She looked at me, her face pale, her smile gone, and then she drove off without a word. It should have been nothing, but it felt like something, like she was planning. The next day, the war began. It wasn't loud at first. It was quiet. Passive-aggressive notes slipped into mailboxes, warnings posted on doors, new emergency bylaws announced in long, angry letters. She wanted to remind us she was still in charge, but something had changed. We weren't afraid anymore. Mr. Jacobs, the old veteran who stood up in the meeting, He started walking door to door, talking to neighbors, gathering signatures. He wanted a vote to remove Linda as president, and people signed, dozens of them. The very people she once humiliated, now ready to strike back. When Linda found out, she went mad. She stormed into yards, shouting about contracts and rules. She called police twice, claiming threats from neighbors. But the police just shook their heads and left. Even they seemed tired of her. Then came the night that broke everything. It was late. The moon hanging low over the cul-de-sac. I was about to head to bed when I heard a betas sound, a soft scratching at my door. I froze. I stepped closer and found a note taped to the wood. The handwriting was sharp, jagged. Stop the petition or pay the price. No name, no signature. But I didn't need one. I knew exactly whose hands had written it. My stomach turned. She wasn't just sending letters anymore. She was sending threats. The next morning, I showed the note to Mr. Jacobs. He nodded slowly, his jaw tight. "She's desperate," he said, "and desperate people do foolish things." By then, the petition had almost enough signatures, and Linda knew it. She doubled down, walking door to door, trying to scare people. Some neighbors gave in, too old, too tired to fight, but others stood tall, and for every signature she scared away. 2 more were added in secret. The tension grew like a storm. Every day felt heavier, every night quieter, as if the whole street was holding its breath. And then the climax came. Another meeting, another chance for Linda to try and hold her throne. She walked into the hall, her face pale, her hair pulled tight, clipboard in one hand, a stack of violation letters in the other. The room was packed, more people than I had ever seen before. Some sat with arms crossed. Some whispered angrily. But all eyes were on her. She began the way she always did, talking about community safety, aesthetic standards, legal compliance. Her voice was sharp, but it cracked at the edges. Then Mr. Jacobs stood. He didn't raise his voice, but his words cut through the hall like thunder. "This is not a community anymore," he said. "This is a kingdom ruled by fear, and it's time we take it back." He held up the petition, pages thick with signatures, dozens of names. Neighbors united. Linda froze. Her lips trembled. Her hands shook. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. People cheered. Some clapped. Some shouted. And for the first time, I saw her mask break. Her eyes darted around the room, desperate, searching for allies. But there were none. Her kingdom had turned on her. She slammed her clipboard on the table. The sound echoed like a final crack in the walls of her throne, and then she stormed out, her heels clicking hard against the floor. The queen of the HOA, walking into the night alone. The room erupted. Laughter, cheers, relief. People hugged each other. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years now united by victory. I sat in the back, silent, watching the chaos, feeling a strange calm. It was over, or so I thought, because the thing about people like Linda, they never give up so easily. Even in defeat, they wait, they watch, they plan. And that night, as I walked home under the soft glow of streetlights, I couldn't shake the feeling that this war wasn't finished, that somewhere in her burned house, in her broken pride, she was plotting her next move. The night after Linda stormed out of the meeting, the neighborhood felt lighter. People smiled more. Kids played late into the evening. Lawns looked alive with color again. It was like the air itself was freer. The chains of fear had been broken. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. People like Linda don't vanish. They hide in the shadows, waiting. At first, it was small things. A strange car parked near my house late at night, headlights off, engine running quietly. When I stepped outside, it drove away slow, no plates visible, no faces seen. Then came the whispers, neighbors finding notes tucked under their doormats, not official HOA letters, but threats written in messy ink. Your petition has consequences. Think twice before celebrating. Most people laughed them off, but some were shaken. Old Mrs. Crawford told me she couldn't sleep. Her hands trembled as she showed me the note left on her porch swing. She swore she saw Linda's shadow near her hedges the night before. I believed her, because then, it was my turn again. One evening, I came home from work. The sun was low. my porch glowing orange in the fading light, and taped to my door was a picture of my kids, playing in the front yard. My blood ran cold. No words, no signature, just the photo. Someone had been close enough to take it, close enough to remind me that I was being watched. I looked around. The street seemed empty, but my skin prickled as if eyes were still on me. I tore the photo down and locked my door. That night, every creak of the house made me jump. Every shadow outside the window made my heart pound. Linda had lost her crown. But now she was fighting a different way, not with clipboards and fines, but with fear. She wanted me to break. She wanted all of us to remember who she was, and part of me wondered, was she working alone, or had she found allies in the dark corners of our street? The next day, Mr. Jacobs called a small gathering at his house. The same man who had started the petition. His living room was crowded with neighbors. Angry faces, worried voices. He held up his hands to quiet us. "She's not done," he said flatly. "She's trying to scare us back into silence, but we won't let her." Some nodded. Some argued. A young couple said they didn't want more conflict. An older man muttered that maybe Linda had a point about order. It was clear the community was splitting again, not with rules this time, but with fear. I spoke then. I told them about the picture. I held it up for everyone to see. Gasps filled the room. Some people covered their mouths. "This isn't about order," I said. "This is about control. She wants to remind us she still owns us, even after the fire." That night, as people left Jacob's house, their faces were different. Not just angry, but unsettled. Because once again, Linda had planted seeds of fear. And fear spreads fast. The next week was chaos. Car tires slashed in driveways, garden fences knocked over in the night, mailbox flags snapped off like twigs. Each time, no one saw who did it, but everyone whispered the same name. By Linda. I caught her once, late at night, standing at the edge of my lawn, her figure half hidden in the dark, her burned house behind her like a black shadow. "Go home, Linda," I called out, my voice shaking but loud. She didn't answer. She just tilted her head, smiled that cold smile, and walked away into the dark. I barely slept after that, because I knew she wasn't finished. Then came the breaking point. It was a Saturday afternoon. The sun was high. Kids playing on sidewalks, neighbors mowing lawns. Normal life had almost returned, until we heard a scream. I rushed down the street. It was the Miller's house. A young family with 2 toddlers. Their back fence was covered in spray paint. Big black letters scrawled across the wood. "Traitors." The mother cried, clutching her kids. The father cursed under his breath, fists shaking. And the crowd gathered, whispering, pointing. No one said it out loud, but we all thought the same thing. Linda that night. Neighbors gathered again, this time not in living rooms, but out in the open, under the streetlights. The air buzzed with anger. Voices rose, fingers pointed. People argued about what to do. Some wanted to call police again. Others said it would be useless without proof. And some wanted to take matters into their own hands. I stayed quiet, listening, because part of me knew the storm was about to break. And then a voice cut through the noise. It was Linda herself. She stood at the edge of the crowd, her face pale in the streetlight, hair messy, clothes wrinkled. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. But her eyes burned like fire. "You all turned against me," she said. Her voice cracked but sharp. "You think you can run this place without me? You think you can have order without rules, without fear? Look at what's happening now. Chaos, vandalism, lies." Her words echoed down the street. Some people flinched. Some shook their heads, but everyone listened. She stepped closer, her voice rising. "I built this neighborhood. I kept it perfect. And now you spit on me. You destroy me. But I promise you this. I will not be forgotten." The crowd erupted. Shouts, curses, some even screaming at her to leave. But she just stood there, smiling her broken smile. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't about houses or lawns anymore. This was about her pride, her hunger for control, her refusal to let go. And I wondered, how far would she go to take it back? The night after Linda confronted us in the street, I couldn't sleep. Every sound felt louder. Every shadow felt closer. Her words echoed in my head. "I will not be forgotten." The neighborhood was restless. People kept their lights on later than usual. Dogs barked at nothing, and every neighbor seemed to glance over their shoulder when walking to the mailbox. Linda had shaken us again. Not with rules, not with fines, but with fear. Days passed. But the tension didn't fade. It grew. More fences were broken. Car windows cracked in driveways. Even Mr. Jacobs found a dead bird on his porch one morning, its body stiff, wings spread wide, a note pinned to its side. Traitors, neighbors gathered again. But now there was shouting. Arguments broke out between families. Some swore it had to be Linda. Others said it was kids pulling pranks. Maybe outsiders. But no one trusted anyone anymore. The unity we had found after the fire was crumbling, and Linda, even in the shadows, was winning again. Then came the night I'll never forget. It was late. Close to midnight, I was sitting in my living room, the glow of a lamp keeping the dark away. My kids asleep upstairs, my wife dozing on the couch, and then a sound, a faint hiss, followed by a thump. I rushed to the front door and froze on my porch. Flames, a bottle broken against the wood, liquid fire crawling across the steps, the smell of gasoline thick in the air. My heart stopped. I grabbed the garden hose, spraying desperately. Water hissed as the flames died, smoke rising into the night. And when it was over, I saw it, a shadow at the end of the street, watching. Linda, she didn't run, she didn't hide. She just stood there, staring at me, her face pale, her eyes glowing in the streetlight, and then slowly, she turned and walked away. I called the police. They came with flashing lights, took pictures, asked questions, but without proof. They said their hands were tied. The fire was small. It didn't cause much damage. They couldn't legally connect it to her. And once again, Linda slipped away. The next day, the story spread like wildfire anyway. Everyone knew, everyone whispered, and the neighborhood was no longer divided. Now, they were scared. Scared of Linda. Scared of what she would do next. People started putting up cameras on porches. Security lights glared into the night. Some families even left to stay with relatives for a while. The perfect suburb looked more like a war zone, but Linda didn't stop. She walked the street at night, bold, unafraid, sometimes carrying her old clipboard, even though no one cared about it anymore. Sometimes just standing in the dark, watching. Neighbors closed blinds when they saw her. Children whispered her name like she was a ghost story. She had become something worse than a president. She had become a legend of fear. And then came the final straw. It was another HOA meeting, she called. No one wanted to go. But curiosity is a strong chain. People showed up, though fewer than before. The hall was dim, the air heavy, and Linda stood at the front again. But she wasn't neat this time. Her hair was messy, her clothes wrinkled, her hands trembling slightly. She didn't carry papers or rules. She carried something else, a box. She set it on the table, slowly, like it was fragile, and she looked at us, eyes hollow, voice low. "You destroyed me," she whispered. "You turned my kingdom into chaos. But if I can't control you, I can remind you of me forever." She opened the box. Inside was a pile of photos, hundreds of them, photos of us, our houses, our children. Taken at night, in daylight, from angles that made our skin crawl. Gasps filled the hall. Mothers clutched their kids. Men clenched fists in rage. Linda smiled, that broken smile. "You belong to me," she whispered. "You always will." Then she scattered the photos into the air. They rained down like black confetti, falling across the floor, across our laps, across the silence. The room exploded. Shouts, screams, neighbors pushing toward her. But she laughed. She laughed like a queen who had lost everything, but still ruled in fear. Police were called. This time they didn't just shake their heads. They took her away, not for the rules, not for the fines, but for trespassing, harassment, and the fire. We watched through the windows as the car drove her into the night. Some cheered, some cried, but me, I stood still, because even as the sirens faded, I knew Linda wasn't gone. Not really. Her shadow lingered on every fence. Her whispers still echoed in the wind. Her eyes burned into the back of my mind, and I wondered, when people like her lose everything, Do they truly disappear? Or do they live forever in the fear they created? The night Linda was taken away, the neighborhood felt lighter again, like a heavy storm had finally passed. People stood in small groups under the streetlights, whispering, pointing, some hugged, some laughed nervously. Children peeked through blinds, eyes wide, as if they had just seen a monster carried away, for the first time in months. We slept in peace, but peace is fragile, and fear has a way of lingering. The next morning I stepped outside with my coffee. The sun rose over the cul-de-sac, golden light stretching across trimmed lawns. But something was different. The silence felt heavy, as if the street was holding its breath. Neighbors came out one by one. We looked at each other, nodding silently and slowly. We began to talk again, not whispers, but real words. It felt strange, almost new. The Millers started fixing their spray-painted fence. Mr. Jacobs trimmed his hedges while humming to himself. Mrs. Crawford watered her flowers without shaking hands. For a moment, we were normal again. Almost. But Linda's shadow was still there. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders, scorched marks on my porch where fire once crawled, cameras nailed to houses, glowing red at night, piles of unopened letters still stacked in kitchens, and the memory of those photos scattered on the meeting hall floor. Our lives stolen by her eyes. The HOA board met again weeks later, this time without Linda, and for the first time. The room didn't feel like a courtroom. It felt like a gathering of people who actually lived here. Mr. Jacobs was chosen as acting president. No clipboard, no sharp tone. He stood with steady shoulders and said simple words. No more fear. The crowd clapped, softly at first, then louder. Some cried. It wasn't just about rules anymore, it was about healing. But healing takes time. Because the damage Linda left wasn't just burned siding and broken fences. It was trust. And trust, once cracked, never looks the same again. I tried to move on. I fixed my porch. I cleaned the soot that stained the wood, but every time I looked out my window at night, I expected to see her, standing there, smiling in the shadows, sometimes. I even thought I did. A flicker of movement by the burned shell of her house. A silhouette in the corner of my eye. The sound of heels clicking on pavement when no one was there. Maybe it was paranoia. Maybe it was her ghost haunting us while she lived somewhere else. Because Linda didn't stay in jail long, she posted bail within days, but she didn't come back to the street. Her burned house was sold. A young family moved in months later, painting it blue, planting sunflowers in the yard. But the soil still felt cursed. I told myself she was gone. I told myself she had no reason to return. But late at night, when the wind rattled the shutters, I heard her voice in my head. Her promise. I will not be forgotten. And she wasn't. Even after she was gone, neighbors talked about her like a legend. Children dared each other to walk past her old house after dark. Parents warned about pulling a Linda whenever someone got too bossy. And the HOA? It never became what it was again. The rules softened. The letters slowed. But the fear of what power can do stayed with us forever. One summer evening, months after she left, I sat on my porch again, the air warm, fireflies glowing in the yard, and I thought about how much had changed before Linda. I thought an HOA was harmless, just a group of neighbors trying to keep things tidy. But after Linda, I learned something darker. Power isn't always about money. Sometimes it's about control. And control can turn the sweetest smile into a weapon. I remembered the way she waved at me that night she cut my power, the way she stood on her porch screaming as her house burned, the way she scattered those photos into the air like ashes of her pride, and I realized, karma doesn't just punish the guilty, it teaches the living. Linda's downfall was more than justice. It was a warning about pride, about control, about what happens when fear rules a street. And as I looked at the neighbors laughing with their kids, fixing bikes in driveways, planting flowers in bright, bold colors, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, because maybe, just maybe, we had learned something from her reign. Maybe we would never let someone like her rise again. But still, at night, when the wind blows through the cul-de-sac and the shadows stretch long across the lawns, I sometimes hear it, the faintest echo of heels on pavement, a whisper that makes me glance at the burned lot that once held her throne, and I wonder, is Linda really gone? Or is she still out there, somewhere, waiting for the day she can return? But tell me this, if your worst enemy was finally gone, stripped of power, stripped of pride, would you believe the nightmare was over? Or would you keep waiting in the dark for the sound of their footsteps again?